Alexis was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, a type of leukemia that lives in the bone marrow. As it progresses, what it does is it doesn't allow her white blood cells to mature and do the job that they're made to do, which is fight infection in her immune system. The cells never grow to maturity, and they crowd out the red blood cells that provide oxygen to her body. Unfortunately, acute myeloid leukemia in many cases is terminal. She was a bright, happy, energetic girl, very athletic, good student, swam club, played softball. At any given time, she was doing 2 sports: Circle City Aquatics, Corona Girls Softball. Regular kid. Fast forward, October 11th, 2006. She had spent the summer with coughing, cold, tired, bruising. We had no idea what was happening or what was about to happen. We went from doctor appointment to doctor appointment, couldn't figure out what was wrong. Finally, we were at her pediatrician's office. She was 15 years old, and they took a basic hemoglobin test, and it came back a 4. 12 is normal, 4 is severe. Upon arriving and after the panel of blood work that we had done, they didn't hesitate to tell me that they believed she had leukemia and that they could not treat her there, and they had scheduled an ambulance to take her to Loma Linda. And that was all in a matter of 30 minutes. Our heads were absolutely spinning. I had not even known or even considered that as an option for what was wrong with my child. But at the same time, I was thinking, I don't even know anybody that's had leukemia. Do people still die from this? The next few days would be trying and would be something that we would never forget. In 2007, during her brief period of remission, I was already involved in Relay for Life, and she was asked to be the featured participant for our luminary ceremony, which she accepted gladly. She spoke during the luminary ceremony, and she shared information about her journey and her treatment and what was going on. During that time, it was a very positive time in her treatment. Everything was looking good, and she had high hopes for stable recovery, but that was not going to happen. She would relapse 2 months later. She relapsed in the middle of June, and she was back in the hospital to stay. This time it was another round of chemo and just some basic stability until the leukemia calmed down a little bit, and she was able to go home. But that was after 3.5 month stay. After Christmas, she got an infection and became ill, and her leukemia spiraled. She was overtaken very quickly, and the prospect of doing chemo at that point was not an option. At that point, we were recommended that we make arrangements for her passing. We never shared with her the very end, how much time she had, and, when she was expected to pass. I referred to it as her twilight time because she was conscious and she was aware and she knew everybody, but she was just a little twinkly twilight where things could completely be past her and she wouldn't even notice. And I think that that's a gift that we have when we're close to leaving this earth, that we are allowed that little escape. At the very end, her dad and I were both staying with her at the hospital, just anticipating the moment she would pass. February 17th, 2007, 4:20 in the morning, she took her last breath. She lived her life like she wanted. She was very outgoing and loved a lot of things, taking pictures, going to concerts, spending time with her friends, playing sports. I'm really happy that she got to do what she wanted to do. She will always be special to all of us. Her laugh, her smile are just a couple of things that we really miss about her.
Hi, my name is Raylene Witt, and I'm currently fighting acute lymphoblastic leukemia. First diagnosed in 2007 when I was 16. I was a junior in high school. I was just pale. One night I felt like I couldn't breathe. I ended up going to the doctor and I needed an emergency blood transfusion. And then from there, from testing, they found out that I had leukemia. So at first I was treated the first time with just chemotherapy for almost 3 years. And I was able to do home and hospital. I graduated high school on time through home and hospital. And by the time I was 17, I went away to college just doing maintenance chemotherapy. So I was able to move out and I had my own apartment and went to college, was going to school. In 2010, I relapsed for the first time. I had just transferred to California Baptist University and was doing my prerequisites for nursing school. I relapsed literally when I found out it was my first day of school. So fortunately, I didn't get too far into school where I had kind of wasted half a semester or anything. And again, I did chemotherapy. I opted not to do bone marrow transplant. At the time, my doctors had told me I could make the choice between bone marrow transplant or chemotherapy. They didn't really have an answer whether they thought one was better than the other. So I chose to do chemotherapy again, just because I was kind of afraid of all of the risks of bone marrow transplant. There's a lot of complications that can come with it. And so I wanted to play it safe. So I did chemotherapy again. I started back at school again, and I was able to, ultimately, my goal has always been to go to nursing school. So at this point in my life, it was 2014, and I made it to, I got accepted into California Baptist University's nursing school. So it was a really exciting time. It was summer, and I ended up noticing a very large and unusual bruise. So I went in, did some blood work, and again, long story short, I found out I was relapsing again. So at this time around was when I opted to do bone marrow transplant. It was what doctors recommended. I was scared to do it because it was something I had never done before. But out of all the bone marrow donors in the registry, they ended up using my brother as my donor. So that was in 2014. His bone marrow ended up taking really well in my system. I did really well with the transplant. I was out of the hospital within 3 weeks, and I didn't have any complications. So fast forward, and I started nursing school this last fall in 2016. I got a semester finished. I was loving it. And this spring, I had started my second semester. And again, I noticed a little bit of bruising on my legs that was more than usual. So I just had some blood work done. Fast forward, and I found out I relapsed for my third time, unfortunately. So this time around, what's been different about my treatment is that I started a new therapy that's still in clinical trials. It's called CAR T-cell therapy. It's not yet widely used, but it's been used for a lot of different types of cancers. There's been some great success stories. With it can come some side effects that are scary, that seem scary, but at this point, I just want to fight and I just want to beat this disease once and for all. So I was open to trying this new therapy. Basically, what the CAR T-cell therapy does is they harvest your white blood cells out of your body, kind of like through a dialysis machine. And then they grow the T-cells in a petri dish, basically in a lab. And they genetically modify them so that they will recognize and attack the leukemia cells in my body. So once they have enough cells grown is when they go through testing, make sure they're all safe to go back in my body, and then they infuse them back in my body. So the stay for that was a 26-day stay for me. Basically, they just have to monitor you very closely, watch for any signs of adverse reactions. So they told me there could be something as a side effect as little as a fever, but it could also get really bad and really high. And, they said some patients have had to go on breathing support and go to the ICU, but that's just, unfortunately, can be a somewhat regular reaction. So fortunately for me, my only side effect was just a high fever for a couple days, 48 hours. And then they gave me a medication that kind of helps with those side effects, and it went away. I had some headaches, so they kept me in the hospital for the headaches in case I was going to have any other reactions. I ended up getting released, and my bone marrow biopsy from last week shows that I'm negative for any leukemia in my bone marrow, which was great news. I was really excited about that. Unfortunately, because there's not enough evidence in the long term as far as how long these T cells will stay in your body and keep continuing to kill off any leukemia cells, they just simply don't know. There hasn't been enough time for research and for the patients that have had it. They still are recommending that I go to do a bone marrow transplant. So the bone marrow transplant will happen in about a month. I didn't find a donor in the bone marrow registry. They just couldn't find one that was a good match for me. I have just a really rare antigen in my blood that makes it difficult to find a match. But they did find a good match in the cord registry. So far, I've just really been encouraged that the CAR T cells have done what they're doing, and I hope it's going to end up being this revolutionary cancer treatment for all types of cancer, not just leukemia. My prognosis at this point, I haven't asked my doctors. My first and second time around, I would ask my doctors what my prognosis was, and it wasn't always what I wanted to hear. It ended up being more discouraging, and I realized I've been able to kick this cancer now. This is my fourth time. And knowing a prognosis isn't really going to help me with my mental attitude, my positivity. And it really is, I've learned about positivity. The more you tell your mind good things, it affects the way you feel. And if you tell yourself, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to fight this, what do I have to lose? I'm going to fight it. And it really does help you. So I stopped asking prognosis probably 5 years back. Every body's different. So even with the research that they have about prognoses, who's to say that that's how your body's going to react? Team Fuzzy is my Relay for Life team. We've been participating in the Relay for Life since my diagnosis when I was 16 years old. To date, we've raised approximately $120,000 for American Cancer Society. My family, I'd like to say, have been my strongest support system over the year. My family and a few of my close friends. And I know that without them and their encouragement and their love and just their constant support, I could not have done it without them. So I'd like to say that they are very important to me, and whoever your support team is very important to your well-being, yes. And lastly, just as a word of advice to any other cancer patients that are going through whatever their fight is, whatever their disease is you just have to always look at the light at the end of the tunnel. Make plans, think of your future, look forward to what you'll be able to do when you're done with this. Don't always try and be tough. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset. It's not fair. Give yourself grace and never give up hope. And that's it.